Hello, welcome back to another episode on YouTube with the Transfer Portal CFB, presented by NoContextCFB. Apologies for a scuffed intro, but this episode will not be scuffed. We're talking FCS football with Sam Herder of Hero Sports. How are you doing, Sam?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you guys having me on.
We're very excited to dive into a lot more FCS coverage this season. This will be one of those things. We have other player interviews for y'all to look out for, so please make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Be on the lookout for all things FCS, FBS. You know how it goes. We like college football here, don't we, Andrew?
We love college football.
And it's not a hot take. Now we'll get right into it. I just want to ask you about quarterbacks, because we have Jason Shelley of Missouri State. He's the returning passing yards leader in the FCS. Shedeur Sanders of Jackson State is excellent as well. Trey Self of SFA. They're both closely behind, but there's so much great quarterback play from top to bottom in the FCS. Who's your favorite quarterback at this level? And then who's the guy that you're seeing to have a explosive rise in the quarterback ranks?
Yeah, I really like Jason Shelley as the top quarterback this year in the FCS. I think he has a really great opportunity to put up some big numbers and be a favorite for the Walter Payton Award, which, basically just goes to the best FCS offensive player. A guy that spent some time at Utah and Utah State. Just a really talented guy, great arm, can make plays with his feet as well. So I think he's set for a big year. The other names you mentioned as well, Trey Self, I mean, he's solid. Obviously, Shedeur Sanders, he's still young into his career, but he's going to have a lot of wins under his belt at Jackson State. One name, too, to keep an eye on is Tim DeMorat from Fordham, a big arm guy. Out of the Patriot League, possibly could get an undrafted free agent deal, next year during the draft process. I think he has some pro talent. And then one more guy to mention is Xavier Shepard. He's from Kennesaw State. He's tough to compare to the other guys because Kennesaw State runs the triple option, and so he'll throw the ball 10 times maybe a game, but all the other ones are, all of his other touches are obviously carries, and he led the FCS last year with 23 rushing touchdowns. And so it's kind of apples to oranges comparing there, but I think Xavier Shepard is another guy that could be a Walter Payton Award favorite just because he's going to have that combination of rushing touchdowns and passing touchdowns.
Gotta love that triple option offense.
Yeah, it's tough.
It is. Speaking of quarterbacks, two of the most stellar quarterbacks last year in the FCS were Eric Barriere and Cam Ward, now both no longer there. How do Incarnate Word and Eastern Washington plan on replacing exceptional talents like them?
Yeah, with Incarnate Word, they lost their Cam Ward from Incarnate Word. He transferred to Washington State, I believe. And so what UIW did is they went to the transfer portal themselves, and they got Lindsey Scott Jr., a player from Nichols, fellow Southland Conference member, who was also, a pretty good quarterback. He got overshadowed a little bit just because you had Cole Kelly from SLU and Cam Ward in that conference. But Lindsey Scott Jr., now at UIW, he was a dual threat guy for Nichols. And so I think that's how they're going to replace him. But Cameron Ward is, a next level talent. I think he definitely has pro potential. I was looking a couple of weeks ago, and he's already I think he's 15th in Heisman betting odds right now. And he obviously hasn't played a snap at the Power 5 level just yet. So that's saying a lot about him. And then Eastern Washington, they have a long lineage of great quarterbacks. Their last 4 or 5 guys have all played professional football, most of them in the CFL. Whether you're looking at a guy like Vernon Adams, Eric Barriere now, I believe, is in the USFL.
Yeah.
I want to say Gage Gubrud is in the CFL now. And so they have a long lineage of guys. It seems like Gunnar Talkington is going to take the reins there. He's a veteran on that team. He was the backup way back in 2018 when they made a run to the national title game. I don't know. He might be like a stopgap kind of guy where he plays 1 year. I think he's a senior this year. He plays 1 year. He kind of gets them by, and then they have some younger recruits that could be pretty good down the line, but maybe not ready yet. I don't think Gunnar Talkington is a pro potential guy, but there's so many weapons around him. Eastern Washington always has great receivers. Well, he'll still probably put up decent numbers, but he might be that like I said, stopgap guy. And then once he's gone, maybe there's a guy that's a redshirt freshman next year that can step up and, be that next great Eastern Washington quarterback.
Definitely looking forward to finding out who EWU's next star at QB is. We'll move on to North Dakota State here. They're an absolute machine. Their fullback, Hunter Lipke, is more than a machine. Like, that dude is such a unique talent. He's an absolute joy to watch. Can you just talk up Lipke a bit and sell college football fans on why they need to watch him dominate this season?
Yeah, I mean, he is he's very versatile. He's listed as a fullback, but he plays running back, tailback too. They line him up at tight end as well. I think last year he was about 6'3", 245 with pretty good speed. So just a hulking presence. I think he lost some weight though. He might be down to like 230 now. So a bit lighter, a quote unquote lighter for Hunter Lipke. But I know he went viral a couple of different times last season in the semifinals and the national title game. Both games on national TV where the tweets are just like, of course, North Dakota State buys and have this big, Mike Allstott looking fullback that's just crushing defenses. And so he's a blast to watch. NDSU kind of picks, which games to utilize him in. We saw in the semifinals and the national title game that they kind of fed him the load and he was essentially unstoppable. But there were other games throughout the regular season where he had maybe 3 touches and wasn't in there a whole lot. And I think that's just because his running style is so bruising that he kind of injures himself a little bit when he runs the ball too much. And so they're a little selective when they give him the ball, but when he does get the ball, he can catch it, he can run it, he can block. I know he's already on the NFL draft radar. Juszczyk, I believe, Kyle Juszczyk from 49ers. He's kind of getting that comparison. Juszczyk is another FCS guy. He went to Harvard. And so I think Lipke is probably going to be a guy that we see in the NFL, doing a lot of blocking and maybe being that versatile weapon that can run the ball at the next level too.
When is NDSU just not going to get talent? Like, when are they just going to stop being the best? I don't know how they keep doing it, but they do. So props to them.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they're in the FCS, which is a whole different discussion on why they haven't gone to the FBS. Yeah, just, location, lack of invites, all those things, different discussion. But as long as they're in the FCS, it is hard, like you said, to see how this train gets off its tracks. They have so much momentum, whether it's, winning a lot of games, whether it's sending guys to the NFL draft. College Game Day has been there a few times. They play on national television just as much as some G5 teams with the number of playoff games that they have. They're 6-0 in their last 6 games against FBS opponents. Great locker room, great facilities. They're putting up a massive $50 million practice facility right now. That was all privately raised by fans and local businesses and stuff like that. $50 million raised privately is unheard of at the FCS level. And so what's going to happen where they stop being good at the FCS level? I don't know, besides them moving up, unless there's some, controversial thing that comes out where, they get sanctioned for recruiting violations or something like that. But I mean, they run a first-class program. And so that's probably never going to happen either. And I'm sure head coach Matt Entz is probably going to be gone in the next few seasons. And they'll probably just end up hiring their offensive coordinator, Tyler Roll. And he'll just keep on, chugging away, on this train and keep on winning national championships. So yeah, it's hard to see NDSU coming down to the rest of the pack. The FCS needs more teams to get where NDSU is going to try to knock them off. And I think there's a very select few teams that can actually do that at the FCS level that can get to NDSU's standard that they've set.
Speaking of locomotives, I can't think of many defenders at the FCS level that can just bully somebody like Patrick O'Connell from Montana. Who are some other defensive studs in the FCS that people need to start watching and be like, wow, this guy is really dang good?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good linebackers at this level. Adam Bach comes to mind. Jacob Dobbs comes to mind as well. They're right up there with O'Connell as well, as far as just being standout linebackers. Isaiah Land, he's the reigning Buck Buchanan Award winner, which goes to the best FCS defensive player. He's a big edge guy for Florida A&M. He's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. BJ Thompson, too, is a guy that's kind of coming on NFL draft radars. He's a a really good defensive end there for SFA. I'm trying to think of who else. Michael Tutsi from North Dakota State. It seems like the Bison always have really good safeties. He's kind of, that next star safety. Trying to think, who else is out there. Justin Ford, another Montana guy. He's a guy that comes to mind, a shutdown cornerback. And so, I'm probably missing a ton of guys. Those are just some names off the top of my head that come to mind as far as guys to keep an eye on and guys that really are fun to watch and big-time playmakers.
I'm a big fan of Campbell's Brevin Allen. I think he's also an absolute stud. Now, let's look at some NFL draft prospects. Obviously, some obvious ones are Tucker Kraft, Xavier Gibson, Destin Talbert, in my opinion, and Cody Mauch. Who are some other FCS players with serious NFL potential?
Yeah, those are the big ones there, especially Tucker Kraft. He's only a fourth-year junior, and so we don't even know yet if he's going to declare for the 2023 draft, but chances are he is, because I've seen some second to third round grades on him. And so, it's kind of, I don't think any South Dakota State fans would blame him if he enters the draft early. Cody Mauch is another one, potentially a day two guy. You mentioned him from North Dakota State. Isaiah Land, I mentioned a little bit earlier. He entered the transfer portal for a little bit after the season. I can't remember how long he was in the portal. It might have been
a few
insane
offers.
Yeah, he had SEC level offers, and ultimately he decided to come back to Florida A&M, which is obviously great for that school, great for him as well, because I think he can put up some monster numbers. I think speaking of transfers too, I saw Tucker Kraft. He did an interview a while back, and he never entered the transfer portal or anything like that, but he was getting some back channel messages from Power 5 teams offering him 6-figure NIL deals if he were to enter the portal and go to their school. And he ultimately obviously turned down those NIL opportunities to remain at South Dakota State. And so those are the big names. South Dakota State also has another tight end by the name of Zach Hines, pretty similarly built as Tucker Kraft. I think he has a pretty good chance to be drafted as well. And so those are the main names right now that we look at it as probably draft locks. I think Justin Ford is another draft level guy. BJ Thompson could be a draft pick as well. But the thing is with the FCS, a lot of guys don't come on the radar until after the season, just because they play a lot of FCS opponents. Scouts may take their film with a grain of salt. And then once they get to the Senior Bowl, the NFLPA Bowl, the East West Shrine Game, they want to see them up against Power 5 guys. And then if they hold their own, they test well at the combine or the pro days. That's when a lot of guys rise. Because last year at this time, I don't think anyone projected Troy Anderson as a draft pick. Christian Watson was like a 7th round projection last year at this time. And both of those guys were Watson was 2nd round, and I think Anderson was either 2nd round or 3rd round this year, just because they blew up, after the season. And so there'll be several draft picks next year, but still kind of waiting to see how they do in the post game or the postseason, kind of draft process to see how they rise.
Yeah, Troy and Christian were so fun to watch at the Senior Bowl, always making plays, and you could tell that even though they played at the FCS, they were still playing with these other guys that played Power 5 level, and they were not only keeping up, they were shining. They were two of the best players at the Senior Bowl, and that's why they both turned into 2nd round picks. We talked a little bit about the transfer portal and especially how Cam Ward made the jump. What are some players that are staying in the FCS but are at a different program now that people need to watch out for?
Yeah, there are. I'm pulling up the sheet now to see the exact number, but there are, like, I want to say, as far as the the transfers, there are like 500 FBS to FCS transfers. There's a couple hundred FCS to FCS transfers, and then there are about, I want to say, like 175 FCS to FBS transfers. And so tracking all these transfers obviously is really, really, really hard. There's some notable names FCS to FBS, but as far as FCS to FCS, Jacob Harris is one that comes to mind. He went from VMI to Richmond, All-American level wide receiver. I talked about Lindsey Scott a little bit earlier, Nichols to Incarnate Word quarterback. Jalen Witcher, he was a freshman All-American wide receiver for Presbyterian. He's now going to Delaware. And then another guy too is Jaden Dawson, Idaho State. I think he was like an honorable mention type cornerback for Idaho State. He's now going to Montana. And, to have Dawson and Justin Ford, on opposite sides of the field, obviously shutting things down at the cornerback position. I think that was a really, really good get for the Grizz. And there's a handful of other guys too. Will McElvain, he's kind of a well-known quarterback. He went from Northern Iowa to Central Arkansas. UCA needs to replace a pretty good quarterback in Braylon Smith. So those are just some guys that stick out in my mind as far as FCS to FCS transfers.
And sticking with the transfer portal theme here, this era is opening so many routes up for FCS to FBS QB transfers. We saw Bailey Zappi carve at Western Kentucky after his time at HBU. Cam Ward's going to do the same at Wazoo. Who's maybe the next quarterback that makes that leap from the FCS to the FBS?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there are off the top of my head, I can't really remember what other quarterbacks are out there in the transfer portal. Just kind of going through some of these quarterbacks, to see if there are any standouts. Jack Chambers was pretty decent at Charleston Southern. He's going to NC State. Derek Heiler, he was an all Ivy League guy at Dartmouth. He's going to Pitt. Who else do we have? Just scrolling down this list quickly, because I like I said, I don't think there was like a huge name outside of Cameron Ward that's going that I think could have an immediate impact.
What about for 2023 for like someone that makes the leap after this season?
I'm not sure. I'm sure there will be maybe some standout quarterbacks that enter the portal and try to go to the FBS, but no names right now, just because it's hard to kind of project who may want to enter the transfer portal after this season.
Guess we'll stick with the FCS to FBS, because one of the biggest rumors that has been circulating around the FCS that ended up being national media over the last few years, with Coach Prime, people always try and speculate, okay, he's at Jackson State right now, but when is he going to make the jump to the FBS? Because people assume that it's inevitable. Outside of Coach Prime, because that's a completely different story, what are some other coaches at the FCS level that we could see in the next few years make that jump to the FBS?
Yeah, the one that always comes to mind is Jay Hill at Weber State, just because, well, for a couple of reasons. He's a fantastic coach. He took Weber State from not a very good FCS program at all to now a consistent winner. They had a bit of an off year last year, but they were consistently in the quarterfinals and the semifinals for a few years there. Matt Entz, I think if he keeps on winning, which is expected, he'll definitely get opportunities from North Dakota State, just because, he took over, a program that kind of just self-operates. It's hard to derail that, but at the same time, now it's his own recruits, essentially. He's really had some great games. I think of the 2019 national championship game, his first season with Trey Lance when they beat James Madison. That was a really, really well-coached football game for Matt Entz. And so he's shown that he can probably coach at the next level. And then, Missouri State's Petrino, obviously he has a lot of experience at the FBS level. He's turned Missouri State around basically overnight. His first two seasons, they've made the playoffs back-to-back years. They hadn't made the playoffs before for like 30 years. And so is he using Missouri State as kind of that stepping stone to get back to the FBS? Obviously don't know for sure, but you would imagine that there could be some G5 teams, maybe even P5 teams that are giving him a call if he has another good year, which I think is expected for him. So, as far as Coach Sanders, I believe he said he has had some opportunities to, take some coaching jobs in the FBS. I don't know, that it'll be interesting, because for me personally, I would love for him to stay in the FCS level. I think he's great for the FCS, even more so great for the SWAC, and obviously even more so great for Jackson State. They had, I can't remember off the top of my head, I think they averaged 43,000 fans a game last year, which was an FCS record. The second most was like 25,000. And so just, that's a huge economic boost, obviously. It's a huge revenue stream for that athletic department. And so he's built something special there at Jackson State. I hope he stays for a long time, because I think if they keep at it, they keep on, signing the number one recruit in the country and bringing in these P5 transfers, I think they could really turn into not just a SWAC powerhouse, but be a top team in the FCS. And so I hope he stays put, but obviously if he keeps on doing what he's doing, he's going to have opportunities. And sometimes those opportunities are pretty hard to turn down, especially if it's a Power 5 job that's offering him 4 times his salary. That for anyone that's tough to turn down. And so we'll see how much longer he is at Jackson State, but he does seem to be very bought in with that vision. And again, like I said, I hope he sticks around for a long time and turns them into an FCS power.
How about with conference realignment? We just saw James Madison made the leap to the FBS. Jacksonville State and Sam Houston State are gone next year. What are some programs that you could see making the leap to the FBS in the near future?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends what happens, with the dominoes. For a while there, it seemed like the next FCS to FBS move-ups was going to be 2 Conference USA. If they wanted to add, 2 more teams just for stability reasons. Eastern Kentucky is all in on trying to go FBS. Tarleton State is also all in on going FBS, which is interesting because they're still transitioning from Division II. They're not even fully transitioned into Division I, but they have a lot of resources and they're all in on basically using the FCS as a stepping stone to get to the FBS. And so those, I think, are the 2 programs that want to make that jump the most. McNeese could be up there as well as far as a Conference USA target, but we'll see. I mean, who knows what shakeout could happen, but if the Pac-12 all of a sudden or the Pac-10, whatever you want to call it now, if they want to expand, maybe they grab San Diego States, maybe they grab Colorado States, maybe a Boise States, if they kind of loosen up their academic requirements to get in. And the Mountain West has a few openings. Where does the Mountain West look to? Do they go to another G5 team in Texas like an SMU, or do they go to Montana State? UC Davis has the money to make the jump, or do they extend their footprint out a little bit and go up to Fargo, North Dakota, and add the Bison? Because I know in Fargo, that's kind of the carrot, right? NESU may not be interested much in Conference USA because CUSA is frankly not as good of a conference as the Missouri Valley Football Conference, and their TV deal is not going to generate a lot of revenue. In fact, I'm pretty sure NESU gets more money from their local TV deal than CUSA does currently with their TV deal. And so CUSA isn't of interest to NESU. The MAC maybe, but the MAC hasn't expressed much interest in expanding. And so Mountain West is kind of that golden opportunity that NESU is waiting for. And a lot of dominoes have to fall for that to happen. But again, if the Mountain West loses teams and they need to add, who do they go to? It could be the Montana schools, or they could look to a North Dakota State or a South Dakota State. And so those are probably the teams maybe to move up next. Again, it just depends on which dominoes fall and who has openings at the G5 level.
I know you said it's not likely, but what I would do for Kent State at North Dakota State on a Tuesday night, wow, that would be so fun.
Yeah, and I've heard that that's actually one reason why NESU isn't interested in the MAC. And honestly, I don't think the MAC has been all that interested in North Dakota State. Because if they wanted to, the MAC probably could have gone after North Dakota State in this latest round of realignment, but I don't think the MAC really had a reason to add teams. But playing on MACtion Tuesday nights, I don't think that interests NDSU much, because while Fargo is a pretty big metro, relatively speaking, but about 250,000 people in the Fargo metro, that's quite a bit. But they also get a lot of people that travel from all around North Dakota to their games. A lot of alum in Minneapolis that travel to their games, and so a lot of people make it a full weekend and have to drive 3, 4, 5 hours to go to North Dakota State games. If all of a sudden they're playing on, Tuesday night a few times a week, I don't think that will necessarily draw well for the Fargo Dome. So I do think that is one reason why NDSU would not be all that interested in the MAC, is because those weekday games may not be too popular with the fan base.
I got one more question. This is more of a media coverage question. Do we think that, since there's going to be new media deals pretty much everywhere over the next few years, do we think that the FCS is going to get more media coverage at a larger scale with all these new media deals being drawn up?
I don't know. I'm kind of skeptical about that, honestly. It's definitely a niche market. You're not going to drive a ton of eyeballs, with FCS coverage. It's a decent chunk. It's enough for me, to make it a full-time job. But I don't know if like ESPN is ever going to hire a full-time FCS writer, or The Athletic is ever going to hire a full-time, FCS writer. I don't think there's ever going to be. I mean, we do have an FCS All-In show. It's called FCS All-In, which will be on ESPN Plus this year. That's kind of the FCS's version of College Game Day, where it's kind of a preview show. So there is that, but that's run by the conferences. And then like I do kind of a national roundtable spot on that. So it's not like CBS or ESPN is having a pregame show for the FCS. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think, a lot of conferences are, they have ESPN Plus deals now. That's great exposure. I think you're seeing more and more websites out there covering the FCS, but they're not like they're not CBS or The Athletic. They're kind of upstart websites that are covering the FCS, and it's not like a huge well-known entity like CBS or ESPN. And there's more YouTube shows about FCS football. There's more podcasts. There's more Facebook groups and Twitter accounts. And so I think, in that sense, like the coverage and kind of the online internet conversation about the FCS has grown by like 500% compared to what it was in 2017. So like that part of the FCS has grown a ton. But as far as, again, mainstream media, covering the FCS a lot, I hope it happens. That'd be sweet, obviously, but I'm kind of skeptical they would ever go that route.
Let's move on to some closing questions regarding the 2022 season. Who are 3 to 5 FCS teams that every college football fan should be watching this season? Maybe it's the top dogs, maybe it's some sleeper picks.
Yeah, so I'll start with the two top dogs, which is obviously North Dakota State and then South Dakota State as well. If you just want to watch, obviously the Fargo Dome has a pretty good home environment, so that has there's something to be said about that. But if you just want to watch two really good football teams with a lot of talent, these are definitely two of them. I think for the 2023 NFL draft, North Dakota State and South Dakota State may have a combined 6 draft picks between the two of them, and several more that signed undrafted free agent deals. These are FBS level teams competing at the FCS level. We saw South Dakota State absolutely hammered Colorado State last year. I think both of these teams would beat a good chunk of FBS teams. Just the Missouri Valley in general, I think is a really strong conference. Off the top of my head, I think this last year's draft, I think the Valley had 9 draft picks between all the teams, and that was more than Sun Belt, more than Conference USA, and more than the MAC as well. So a ton of talent in that conference, and North Dakota State and South Dakota State are the top teams. One sleeper team is Stephen F. Austin, a really fun program to watch because they have Xavier Gibson, who's an explosive wide receiver. They're well balanced too. It's not all offense and no defense. They're pretty pretty balanced team. Colby Carthel is their head coach. He's a character. He's fun to listen to, and just from that aspect of it, I think they'd be a team that a casual college football fan might want to follow. And plus, a lot of people know SFA because of their basketball success, but they're growing a pretty good football program as well. And then one more, and this is kind of going back to a blue blood, I think is Montana. They've had some average years for a little bit, but now they're back on the rise into being an FCS power. And I think Washington Grizzly Stadium in Missoula, Montana is a bucket list stadium to go to for anyone. But if you're not in the area, at least just watch it, on ESPN Plus. It's a really cool stadium, really loud stadium. You got the hills and the mountains right in the background there. And so just one of those games where if you just flip on, you go, okay, this is a pretty cool setting. And so those are, I guess those are like 4 teams that I would suggest to a casual college football fan to, if you want to pick a team, pick one of them and follow them throughout the year.
Do you think South Dakota State could beat Iowa?
So I think it's going to be really close. I'm not going to – do I think they can? Yes. Would I predict it? No. But they have – to beat a Power 5 team, you need to play in the trenches, you need a good front seven, and you need depth because usually we see a lot of FCS versus FBS games where it's like 17-14 at halftime, and everyone's like, oh, this is a great game. And then all of a sudden, the FBS team comes out and scores 21 unanswered in the second half because of the depth. South Dakota State has that depth. They have their pro talent. I think it's going to be a good game. If it was South Dakota State's plus 8.5, I would hammer South Dakota State on that because I think it'll be within 7 points. But I can't pull the trigger just yet on predicting South Dakota State to win, but I do think it'll be a really, really good game.
Another game is North Dakota State, Arizona, which is a significantly higher chance of the FCS team coming out on top.
Yeah, that one, it'll be interesting because I think that's in week 2 or 3 off the top of my head. And there has been instances in the past where FCS teams have been favored over FBS teams. When you look at sports books, I think Holy Cross, I want to say someone was playing UConn last year. And they were like, I mean, UConn's UConn. So, but the FCS team was like a 2.5 point favorite versus UConn. And so it has happened before, but it doesn't happen often. We could see it again this year with NDSU being, a few point favorite against Arizona. At the same time, Arizona has brought in a ton of transfers. And so we don't exactly know what we're going to get. Arizona lost last year to Northern Arizona. And NAU is not that good of an FCS program, frankly. So they were pretty bad last year. I don't know if they're going to be bad, decent, or good this year. But NDSU has won 6 straight against FBS opponents. They haven't played one since Iowa, which was in 2016, I believe, because no one wants to schedule them. And so they'll certainly be chomping at the bit to get another win there.
All right, final question, the end-all be-all. What 2 teams are playing for the Natty, and who's going to win it all?
Well, North Dakota State, I think, is going to win it again, barring something surprising, like injuries or something like that. It's hard to see someone knocking NDSU off. I know South Dakota State has done it several times in the regular season, but NDSU just takes it to another level in the postseason, and the Jacks kind of continue to hit a hump that they can't get over in the playoffs. And so would it be absolutely shocking if South Dakota State beat NDSU in Frisco? I don't think so. But I would still take NDSU over the field. As far as who they beat, it's tough. I am confident that South Dakota State is the second best team in the country, but we see it a lot of years where the number 1 and number 2 teams in the country play in the semifinals just because of the 24-team bracket and how it's shaken out with the seeds. I think James Madison was the second best team last season, and they end up playing NDSU in the semifinals. And then NDSU beat Montana State, hammered Montana State in Frisco. And so as far as who NDSU beats this year in Frisco, I would say South Dakota State, but if they end up being on the same side of the bracket, I could see a rematch with Montana State or Montana, because I kind of view those 4 teams, NDSU, South Dakota State, and the 2 Montanas as being the 4 best. And so I think those 4 will be in the semifinals this year. I just don't know what matchups it'll be in the semis.
Any of those would be incredible matchups, and if NDSU wins it all again, I'm sure we'll see Hunter Lipke pull out a few more leg dabs.
Yeah, that leg dab is something else. I can't remember who started it. Someone on their team, one of their tight ends on the team, started the leg dab. But I never noticed it until he did it in the national title game. I was like, what the hell was that? And then it went viral, and I think he tweeted that it's called the leg dab or something like that. So it's pretty impressive. I mean, athletically, to be able to pull that off, that's pretty good.
Lipke's a unicorn. That guy is just a freak athlete, and we thank you so much for educating a lot of people on the FCS here today. We really appreciate your time, and you can't thank you enough. So thank you so much for doing this. And for those watching on YouTube, please make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure to follow Sam on Twitter as well. And I'll see you.